It's your one-stop shop for great wrestling. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell brings a host of great shows right to your device. There's the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Amazing Puro Academy Show, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's long-running hit, Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the hilarious Other Ship podcast, and a whole lot more. Great shows and great guests, but where do you find all this stuff? Really simple. Try logging on to WrestleCopia.com. As I like to say, it's your one-stop shop for great wrestling memories.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the latest edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hope everybody's good out there. We're going to walk back one of our good friends, Mike Leotis from Wrestler Weekly. And this time we're going to take a long, loving look at Stampede Wrestling. Oh, rough and tumble stuff. I remember Bulldog Bob Brown was there. And Bad News Alan Coage. What a tough guy he was. Holy smokes, I wouldn't want to mess with him. Wouldn't want to mess with Makhan Singh, too. Man, he was big. He was so big. If I was fighting a guy like him, I'd just be backing up. Whoa! I backed up one step too many. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. I think that guy weighed 400 pounds. Everybody, this is Bob Smith, the former managing editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, and this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. How are you all tonight? Just a reminder that I know that Joe Puccio has been kind of in and out of the scene lately. He's got a really big project he's working on at home. He will be back as soon as possible, I guarantee it. Mike Leotis of Wrestler Weekly rejoins us, and we're going to talk about Calgary Stampede, or just Calgary or Stampede. I've heard it referred to all three ways. Ed Whalen, the announcer, all those great stars, the Hart family, you name it, we're going to talk about it. So get yourself a Labatt's or a Molson or some back bacon, according to Bob and Doug McKenzie. I love SCTV too. I love Canada. Love Toronto. Love Canadian music. Love Canada. I hope you do too. So hold on for a second. We're going to talk about Canadian stuff. Don't you dare go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hey, Mike, it's kind of cold here, It's been a long winter. What do you say, eh?
What do you say, eh? What do you say we head north of the border for a little bit more winter, don't you know?
Oh, I could tumble to that, Hi, everybody. It's Mike Leotis. He's back on the show. We're going to talk about the days of Stampede Wrestling in Calgary. Mike, how have you been? Good to see you again.
I have been well, Bob. It is always great to be here with you on the Outdated Wrestling Hour, the podcast of podcasts in my world. And Calgary Wrestling was really a great territory. Not one that gets talked about as much anymore, but I'm glad we're going to highlight this together today. It is always one of my favorite things to chat. Some good old-fashioned wrestling with you, Bob.
Well, we talked about this, and as everybody knows, or if you listen to the show, I started at PWI in the late 1980s. And we were fortunate to have someone at Calgary, customs and everything, send us the weekly shows on VHS tape. If there's anybody younger, how many young people don't know what a VHS is or a VCR? None of it.
None of them. My kids don't even know.
No, of course not.
I got kids in their 20s and they're like, a VHS. Well, even corded headphones now are becoming a thing of the past. It's all AirPods and all those things. I have my only pair of AirPods that I've ever used. I just bought recently, and I'm still getting used to that whole, that
All
whole
right.
system.
I'm going to fess up on a couple things. Number one, studio recordings are best with wired headphones, and podcasts were far better with wired because you don't have latency. In other words, if somebody's got buds on, they have a tendency not to come in at the exact time when you said something. So it creates a latency between when the person talks, the other one hears. I also have a pair. I'm gonna say this to the world. I also have a pair of iPods, right? My first pair, and I bought them because they have a hearing aid feature.
Nice.
The AirPod 2 has an actual pretty good set of hearing aids built into the works there. You just have to set them up a certain way with your tablet or, whatever your computer is, and they work relatively well. And now my hearing loss is not severe, but in noisy situations like bowling alleys and, there's a lot of spatchel noise, I need a little goosing. So I'll put those in, and it doesn't look like I'm wearing hearing aids. It looks like I'm wearing iPods.
Nice.
How cool is that?
That's really cool. See, I think that's a good use of modern technology right there. I think that, and you look cool doing it.
Now, if they invent a portable sitz bath soon, I'm all set. It's silly. I wish I had a cowbell or something. Anyway, we better get on to wrestling here rather than my aging self. So anyway, we used to get the VHS tapes, from the promotion, from Stu Hart himself. And I watched it all the time. But it was late period. And we'll talk about which wrestlers were bigger in the early days and the middle days and what I'll call the late times. 80s, I think they closed up shop around 89. There's some dispute about that. Some people say 88. Some people say 91. I'm just going to say it was the late 80s and be done with it. And, because I can't be accurate. And they kept reviving it. There's a tape on YouTube that John McAdam told. It says it's marked 1980. It's like a return of Stampede Wrestling or something. But it was actually, he says it was taped around 85.
Yeah, this was when the short period where Stu had sold to Vince McMahon, and they were trying to do a revival, and you could see it has like a brand new ring apron, and they're doing like these really fancy red carpet introductions, and it's labeled, I think, Stampede Wrestling, but it was not Stampede. This is when they were going as the IWA, and they even crowned Masked Superstar as the world champion during this period. In fact, my good friend Scotty Richardson has some programs from this time period that he's been able to match up to this time. So this is very interesting. John McAdam, also a wonderful wealth of knowledge. But yes, I'm familiar with this video. And this was, prior to Stu getting the territory back. So there's a lot of different revivals and things. There's also some tapes in the 2000s with Mauro Ranallo commentating of some of the, them trying to revive Stampede in the early 2000s.
You got to see the one you were talking about, though, from 85, because it's got where else are you going to see Sweet Daddy Siki getting out of a limousine in a tux? Remember, it was like the return, and they were all coming in tuxes outside the arena, and they go inside the arena. It was sad, to be honest. They go inside the arena, you could tell there's nobody there.
No.
There were some fans there, but it certainly wasn't sold out or anything close to it. And the main event was Siki and Bad News Allen against this old tag teams. You remember who they were? They were they were a little bit veteran. They were like, oh my gosh, my granddad's in the ring again. Old. I don't remember who they were, though. I can't remember seeing it. It is worth seeing just for the sheer ridiculousness of the whole thing.
Well, and they have, Kerry Brown coming out of the one limo, and Kerry Brown was I don't want to say a big star, but Kerry Brown, I think, is more famous. I mean, he made a small name for himself in Stampede, but I believe he was the son-in-law of Bulldog Bob Brown, or the nephew of Bulldog Bob Brown.
Something like that.
That. But they have him, but the Sweet Daddy Siki, I never get. And Sweet Daddy Siki, more a Toronto guy than any other in Canada, lived in Toronto and was a DJ at a Toronto club up until a year or two before his passing. And so,
legitimate country music recording artist.
Yes. So Reginald Siki, a man of eclectic talents. But it was cool. And Siki by that point has to be almost 50.
You would think.
You would think. So, and And I'm sure we'll talk about him more, but Bad News Alan Coage. Talk about a real deal guy. He had probably some of his finest pro wrestling moments, maybe not his biggest or most well known, but just some of his finest work as a pro wrestler in Calgary.
He was perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that. There's a videotape of Bad News. What do they call him at the end in the WWE? The Bad News Brown on the Arsenio Hall show. And he's jaw jacking with Arsenio, and it's a laugh riot because he doesn't break character. He's still the mean, tough, don't mess with me, I'm not putting up with it guy, He was great heel. Oh my gosh.
He was so unique too. And his character was so unique for that time in the WWE, with the WWF, and he never broke that. I used to love when they would do the Survivor Series every year, and he'd walk out on his teammates, and it was just. It was so him. He didn't function well with others, and they kept that. He was very refreshing during that time. But again, just he played it so real, and he was a legitimate tough man. Believe was a bronze medalist for judo, I think, in the Olympics. I mean, just a legitimately very strong and tough human being.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, he had a great feud in Stampede with Bret Hart.
Yes.
Who later they had a feud together in the WWF. And I think that's poetic justice right there.
Agreed. And I think that was, and those are guys that Bret really learned how to work with. And you could see flashes of what Bret became when you watch him in Stampede. Everything Bret Hart did from the time he was young until the end of his career looked good. That everything they did looked good. It's few and far between, right? There's certain guys that were pros like that. I think Nick Bockwinkel was another guy like that, where just everything they did looked good. And Bret Hart, to me, everything a true technician, but also a master at selling, right? A master at making it look real, like competition. And he was just a master at that, even from his earliest days.
Well, there's a recent Gorilla Monsoon called Bret Hart, The Expletive Execution.
Yep.
I mean, and he meant it. And he was very fun. If you read the book, have you read the Brian Solomon book about Gorilla Monsoon?
But it's on my wish list.
You have to get it, my friend. You really do. And I'll tell you what, in real life, Gorilla was probably one of Bret's biggest backers backstage. He just thought he was a perfect wrestler. Is it Gorilla Monsoon? I did not meet him, and I wish I had now. He sounds like just a fascinating, normal, hardworking professional from in the ring to the gorilla position to anything he did as management. I just thought, I really admire him now. At least I got to meet his grandkids.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Brian Solomon had a book signing party, and he invited over the living relatives of Gorilla Monsoon. It was a blast. I couldn't stay long, but I had a blast when I was there.
Oh, that's so great. And, I've been chatting with Austin Idol recently, and he's spoken a little bit about, going over to Gorilla Monsoon's house in the summer for pool parties. This is when he was still Iron Mike McCord, and said just Gorilla was the real deal as a human. He said it would be all the heels, because George Steele would be there and all these guys. And he said he was just the real deal as a human. And I don't think I've ever heard anything bad about Gorilla. I've always grown up to, respect him, and, but he knew talent, and he saw it in Bret. And, it's just so evident when you look at him. I think Bret Hart is a complete package as a pro wrestler.
It was fun watching him work his way up. Because I remember the earliest ones. Remember they had the Toronto syndicated show while it was taken in Toronto? Yeah. Because he was there in Canada, they gave him a little bit of a push as a single. Yeah. And then they put the tag team together, and even that had to be kind of goosed for a while. Mm-hmm. But when they hit and they added Jimmy Hart, stars.
Perfect.
Everybody knew how good they were, and the opponents knew how good they were, and that's why they had so many classic matches, no matter who the opponents were.
Oh, they did, and Neidhart was such a perfect compliment to Bret because he was the power guy, and they just meshed so well together. Their team moves, just tag team psychology, and the speed and the power, and it was like finesse and grit. It was so good. They were a joy to watch. I loved their matches with Demolition. I loved their matches with the Rockers. They had, and of course, the British Bulldogs, who we're going to discuss here as well. That was a match made in heaven. Those four together, Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy Smith. And the Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid we're going to talk about were much smaller men in Stampede Wrestling, not carrying all that extra weight, but they were still, once they were carrying that extra weight as well, were still excellent competitors. But I could watch the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs all day long.
Well, since we're talking about that period, let's start backwards.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about what I saw when I was following Stampede through the magic of VHS tapes back in the PWI days. So here's a list of the people who wrestled there. And it really wasn't bad. I mean, I enjoyed it. Owen Hart was kind of ruling the roost at that point, 88 or so.
Yeah.
He was really getting a big push. And one of the main heels was Makhan Singh, Mike Shaw, who later became fill in the blank. You know, he had so many different, Norman the Lunatic and all that other stuff. They had Hiro Hase, Larry Cameron, who I talked about before we hit the record button. Larry Cameron had it. I'm so sorry he had an early demise. He was a physical specimen, a good talker, and he's the kind of guy you looked at and went, ooh, he's got what it takes. You agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Larry Cameron, he looked so cool with those shades and the bandana. Just oozed cool. And he was tough. He had a great build. I saw him wrestle a show. I want to say it was from New Jersey. Wrestle Kerry Von Erich in 1990, I think. I think Cameron passed in 90 as well. So it couldn't have been long before he passed, but he just looked like such a star standing there with Kerry Von Erich, who had such a great look himself. I think Larry Cameron would have been a big deal wherever he would have gone. 100% agree on Larry Cameron. He was excellent, and he fit that Stampede so well. You know, you put him in there with Owen Hart, that's a clash of styles, but it's a good clash of styles. You put him in there with a guy like Makhan Singh, who, to me, that was Mike Shaw at his best. I loved Norman. Not a Bastion Booger fan or Friar Tuck or whatever he became, but you know, Norman was at least lovable.
Yes.
Makhan Singh, and again, there was, you know, he had Gary Albright in that stable. I forget what Singh Gary Albright was, but a young Gary Albright, who again, another guy who, you know, unfortunately passed early, but who had a promising career. Hiro Hase, as you mentioned, was there young. They had the Viet Cong Express. So they had a lot of young Japanese guys. Even Jushin Liger, you know, as Keiichi Yamada under his, you know, given name was there at some point.
Also, they had an act I did not like. They had Jason the Terrible and the Zodiac. They were the monster tag team. It was hokey.
Barry Orton, I believe.
Was it really? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Tyson Kidd at the very, very end. Dan Crofat. Oh, double F-A-T.
Yeah, I don't know.
I've always called it Crofat. Hey, you know what? He was big in Japan.
He became very big in Japan, teamed with Doug Furnace. They were an excellent tag team. And even, you know, got a little bit of a push in the States in the late 90s there with the WWF and had a minute here. But they were excellent. Their stuff in Japan, if you ever get a chance to look at some All Japan from the late 80s and early 90s, tag team matches, it's definitely worth your time, wrestling fans.
And I'm just going to go through the rest of the people who just migrated out of there. Brian Pillman, of course.
Brian Pillman.
Biff Wellington, right?
Loved Biff Wellington.
With mashed potatoes, you can't beat it. Johnny Smith, Rhonda Singh, Jerry Morrow. Rip Rogers was a heel there for a while.
Yes.
Chris Benoit wrestled. And something I've always thought of wrong. Chris Jericho trained under Stu Hart, right? He never wrestled in Calgary, which I was surprised.
So he came on, Chris Jericho made his debut in 90, and he did wrestle with some of those guys. He went to the Hart Brothers Academy, and him and Lance Storm, they both debuted in 90, and they wrestled in that era, but Stampede had already closed. So Jericho, I remember the first time I saw Chris Jericho featured in a magazine, I believe it was one of the George Napolitano magazines. He had a barbed wire match with Biff Wellington, who did wrestle a one-off in WCW. I don't know if you remember this. The 1992 NWA Tag Tournament, he teamed with Chris Benoit, and WCW, in their infinite wisdom, called him Beef Wellington. And that was my first introduction to Biff. But
was that part of the St. Louis
Pat O'Connor Memorial Tag Team Tournament? Because I was at that one.
That was 2 years later. This was
That was
at
2 years later.
Citadel.
Okay.
This was a Clash of the Champions.
Okay, all right.
92. This was the one that Gordy and Williams won.
You're right. As soon as he got done with Hart, he did work that territory, but it wasn't that territory. It was another name. It was another promoter.
Yeah, it was like WFWA, I think. Don Callis was a part of it. Bob Brown was heavily involved there. I forget who else, but even a young Kensuke Sasaki was a part of that.
And Lance Storm, who also trained with the Hart brothers, right? Wrestling camp in Calgary. Together, they went from there to Smoky Mountain.
Smoky Mountain Wrestling.
That's why it blurs for me. I always thought they came from Calgary Stampede.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the case. There was a little gap there.
Yeah, had it been open, I'm sure they would have absolutely fit right in there because they were, tailor-made for Stampede Wrestling, both those guys.
And here's something I do not remember, and I should have. The British Bulldogs made a return.
They did.
Yeah, in the late 80s. And they ran an angle with the Bulldogs splitting up in 89.
They did. So Johnny Smith becomes then the British Bruisers with Dynamite Kid, who goes heel, and Davey Boy Smith, who becomes the baby face. I don't know. I don't remember how far the feud went, but I remember the angle. They're in the locker room, and the split happens where they attack Davey Boy. Johnny Smith had a good build. I don't remember too much about him as a wrestler, but he had a good look. He was a short little guy, but he had a good look and fit well with Dynamite. And they teamed in Japan as well, I believe.
That's a late period for Tommy Billington, and it's like I tend to I totally forgot about it after he left the WWF at that point. I just did. You forget the smaller stuff.
Yeah.
But he worked for a while until he decided he couldn't do it anymore, I guess.
Well, his back was pretty much shot at that point. He had gotten that injury. What was that? Late 86, right? Early 87. And that was pretty much end of his real run. He worked for a couple of more years after that, 88, 89, but that was really the end of it for him. Another gentleman that we had talked about here in 89 that had a look in a short run was Steve DeSalvo, who wrestled as Steve Strong in Montreal, and I believe Sadistic Steve Strong in Puerto Rico. Had an intense look. I mean, just looked like $1 million. Was more of a power wrestler, but he did have some agility to him. Gets picked up in WCW and wrestles as the Minotaur for you fans who might remember that for a minute. But Dusty was not a big fan of DeSalvo, and that ended the Minotaur's terrible gimmick. Steve DeSalvo just quietly retired after that. But DeSalvo had a heck of a look and was powerful and very impressive in the ring. I was surprised he didn't go further because I thought he was a can't miss at one point.
I predicted in PWI that he was going on to great things, and he did not. And I couldn't have been more surprised. He just kind of, like you say, just kind of disappeared. He wasn't around anymore. I just remember him in International Championship Wrestling, the Gino Brito, or Rick Martel was there at that point. He just was a block of granite, built like a block of granite. I mean, he was just thick and big and natural, and just boom. Yeah. Had all the power in the world. And that was the era of the power wrestler. So I thought he was going to take off, but things don't happen that way sometimes. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, not at all, and sometimes those can't miss things they miss and you wonder why, and you wonder why opportunities don't happen, but it didn't for him, and he had a solid run, albeit a short career, made some waves in Canada and in Puerto Rico. But I thought it would be much bigger, especially for the size that he had at the time. And the fact that he can move for a big guy. You weren't going to get a 5-star classic out of Steve DeSalvo, but he had some pretty solid matches with Abdullah the Butcher that I enjoyed. And, Abdullah would make his way into those territories at different times. There's actually a video up. Abdullah is wrestling Jerry Morrow at the Olympic Saddle Dome in Calgary. The only card I've ever seen video of from the Saddle Dome, by the way.
I happen to own that.
Oh, okay.
I own that tape. Somehow you know why? A local video store was selling it for like $1 or something.
Oh, see? There you go.
And I can't look at it now because it's a videotape, but I do own it. So.
And Bret Hart comes in and saves the day and puts a hurting on Abdullah. And you can see a fiery young Bret Hart really giving it to Abdullah the Butcher there. And fun tape.
Actually, no, that is not the tape because I watched that one today on YouTube.
Okay.
Well, by the way, you guys can catch some Calgary Stampede on YouTube. Not a lot, but there's some out there.
Yes.
Let's go to what I call the middle period, when they were hot, a few years before that. Like you mentioned, Abdullah Butcher. They had George Wells, who was in and out of the WWF for a while. We talked about Bad News Allen, Leo Burke.
Oh, Leo
the Cuban assassin. They were the first place. History is not kind to this little tidbit. Honky Tonk Wayne, who later became the Honky Tonk Man. Same gimmick, same thing, same heel. I'm just shocked that nobody seemed to have known that at all. It's the best kept secret, I think.
He teamed, I believe, with David Schultz up there and was a tag team. And Wayne Farris, to me, is so underrated. He was so good at what he did. People concentrate on the fact that he wasn't a good wrestler. Well, what makes him not a good wrestler? He got heat. He knew, he was a great gimmick. He knew what he was doing in there. He doesn't have to be Lou Thez. He never was Lou Thez. He didn't have to be. He had great runs in Memphis, great runs in Southeast. And his Calgary run was excellent. There's not much film out there on it, but by all accounts, that's really where he fleshed out that character. He did great in it. The biggest mistake that was made was not his Intercontinental title run. I think that was great. I think it was when they tried to bring him in as a babyface.
The guys who are really good at being annoying tools, you hate them at the time.
Yep.
When you look back at them, you go, boy, they did a great job. Because you start to realize that to be that hated just from having a cocky attitude or whatever, or snark, that's a skill. That's why they're doing it. And nobody was better at it than Wayne Farris. And I'll tell you what, and this just popped into my mind. He may have been an Elvis impersonator, but what got him over in the WWF was he wrestled like Jerry Lawler.
He did.
That was heel Jerry Lawler he was
Yes,
doing.
it was. Yes,
there's no question in my mind about that. Think about that.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, he was the guy that was going to sneak out a win. He shouldn't have won, but he was going to sneak out a win by doing something that he shouldn't have done. Honky was the guy that you knew the babyface could whoop his butt. And he did for 90% of the match. But Honky would sneak it out. You hated him for it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. He beat Steamboat.
He did.
For the Intercontinental title.
He did. 2 years almost.
And this is a funny story. At PWI, Dave Roosevelt, my fellow writer and a great guy, a really good writer, he loved the Honky Tonk Man. He loved the character. He loved everything about it. He was so happy for a year until the first SummerSlam when the Warrior beat him up 31 seconds, whatever it was. Yeah. And Dave was fit to be tied in the office the next day. He's like, how can they do this? He sneak attacked him for the belt. He was serious. Here's a guy too smart for wrestling. Dave was too smart for wrestling, and yet he was upset that the Honky Tonk Man lost the Intercontinental title to the Ultimate Warrior. You got to love it.
And that just shows. And again, he made the Ultimate Warrior that night. And it was finally the comeuppance that Honky was waiting for. So I love that story. But again, I have so much respect. I love the Honky Tonk Man, and I love that he fleshed that out. And his tag team partner at that time, Dr. D, David Schultz, we talked about how real Bad News Alan Coage was. Talk about real. David Schultz is it. Talk about a mean, ornery kind of guy. That is David Schultz.
Yeah. Well, back in the period we were talking about too, they had the Sheep Herders come in.
Yeah.
The Samoans.
The Samoans were there, yes.
Billy Robinson for a taste, a cup of coffee. Of course, everybody knows Jim Neidhart's run there.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope I pronounce this right. I've never been able to pronounce this man's name. Became Louis Cyr in the WWF. Gilles Poisson. I only read it in the magazines, but I've never learned how to pronounce his name. I never saw him work.
I feel like from watching hockey and all the years of seeing French names and all that, I try to go with Gilles Poisson.
You're probably right. And of course, Dynamite and Davey.
Dynamite and Davey.
Harley Race would pop in now and again.
Yep.
Kendo Nagasaki.
And Rick Martel, was Mr. Sakurada up there.
Right.
Mr. Hito.
And Martel would peek his head through the curtains every now and again. So the middle period was full of stars, full of action, and Abdullah was absolutely crazy in Calgary. That was gourd.
For my money, Abdullah the Butcher, it was such an attraction. And so good everywhere he went. And those matches didn't have to have definitive endings, man. Abdullah could just draw money with the top guy and get your top guy over even more just from working with him. That was the beauty of guys like Abdullah the Butcher. who was an attraction like that. And we did a show on those attractions not that long ago. That, to me, was, again, the beauty of a talent like Abdullah, who was going to bring that chaos. That's what you paid money to see. But I think why he worked so well in Calgary was the fact that Calgary was a very hard-hitting territory. It was a rough and tumble. It was like Texas North. Those guys, I mean, it was hard. It was stiff. It was rough. But there was a finesse to it as well. When you talk about some of the lighter weight guys, who, when Davey Boy Smith started out, he was a junior heavyweight up there. People don't realize that. He was 190 pounds when he started there. And that's somewhat in the earlier days before they were the British Bulldogs, but that's where him and Dynamite started as rivals. When the junior or they called it the mid heavyweight division up there, the British Commonwealth Mid Heavyweight Championship. Yeah, just incredible wrestling that they did, but it was hard hitting. It was fast. It was precursor to the American style that you saw, kind of that influence with like the cruiserweights in WCW in the mid 90s.
I will say that I watched a bit of it lately, and you're right. It was harder hitting than I recalled. I don't recall it. If you sat through even an hour of TV taping, they usually leave you with a cliffhanger or a really hard edge match. They'd have some scientific stuff on early, some high flyers and some lightweights. But by the time it was Owen against fill in blank, those matches were really, really rough and tumble, like you said, and a lot more gritty than I gave them credit for back in the day. Because I was looking at all kinds of things then, but now I look at them and I go, well, this wasn't like I saw later on in later years. This was really rough stuff.
Yeah. And this is an era of Owen Hart that I wish fans would watch and see, because don't get me wrong, his WWF stuff was great. This and his Japan stuff are Owen Hart at his absolute best. His character development and all that later in the WWF, he was great at and did really well. But and he ended up becoming a fantastic heel. But as far as the wrestling aspect and the hard-hittingness of what Owen Hart could be in the ring, to me, this was his peak. And he had a cup of coffee with WCW in the early 90s, too, and that ended up not really going anywhere. But I remember him coming on WCW television that time and being so excited to see him in WCW and thought he was going to be a huge, huge star for them.
I thought he was going to be a huge star wherever he... I met him during the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance days, and I talked to him quite extensively. I tell you what, he had everything to talk and wrestled a great match in Philadelphia. So I became an instant fan because I got to see him right from ringside.
Right.
But here's the thing about Owen. It's a funny thing. I put him together with Jeff Jarrett because I liked him the best, Calgary Owen Hart the best, and I like Memphis Jeff Jarrett the best.
I agree with you.
Like, babyface Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah.
I thought he was a rock solid competitor. There's nobody he couldn't keep up with. He had to live up to the Jarrett name, but he did that in spades. After a while, people forgot he was the promoter's son, and nobody even thought about it. And I just think both of them were at their absolute primes in Calgary and in Memphis. It's just my 2 cents on it.
I 100% agree with that. I think that Jeff Jarrett later on was never the same as that Jeff Jarrett. And don't get me wrong, Jeff Jarrett had a wonderful career. To me, he always fell short of being that top guy. I think they pushed him as a top guy for a while, and to me, it just never clicked all the way. But that babyface Jeff Jarrett in the USWA in Memphis, he had an early match. Again, I always go back to Nick Bockwinkel, I feel, but he had an early match with Nick Bockwinkel in the 80s, and you could start to see where he was. But by the time you talk 91, 92, he's teaming with Lawler and he's coming into his own, and he did really well. You're right. There wasn't a second thought about Jerry Jarrett, who was very popular as a wrestler and still somewhat as an authority figure in that time. And Jeff got over. Owen got over on his own, right? And that was huge. And you talk about the Hart brothers. Bret and Owen, I think, were far and away the best wrestlers of the troupe. Bruce was a good tag guy. Bruce wasn't great, and Keith was decent. But as far as wrestling wise, Bret and Owen, I think, were head and shoulders above their other brothers.
And people forget about early Jarrett. He was a high flyer.
He was. Yeah.
People forget that. He had all kinds of top rope moves back in his early career, which he kind of
stopped doing it. I mean, they all do it,
Yeah.
Tony Garea in the WWF used to have the highest dropkick I ever saw. I saw him stop doing dropkicks after about 7. You cannot do dropkicks your whole career. I think you'd kill yourself.
No, yeah.
I think that's another hip cruncher.
Absolutely.
There are certain things that are for the younger wrestler and some that the older guys just can't accomplish anymore.
And you take a look, right? What did Jeff weigh at that point? 205, 210?
I call him 225.
Yeah, you think so at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. He was taller than I was.
Yeah, that's true. He had some height, but even Owen, right? 220. That time. So they were quick, they were light, but they packed a punch. And they were great to watch. And they ended up teaming with each other later on in their careers. I thought they made an excellent tag team together. But they were two really great wrestlers.
Well, let's get back to, since we're talking about Calgary Stampede or just Stampede or just Calgary, everybody called it something different, right?
Yeah.
But let's talk about the Harts. Virtually everybody who named Hart that came out of the Hart family competed in Stampede. We'll go Ross Hart, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Smith Hart, Bruce Hart, Keith Hart, Wayne Hart, and Teddy Hart.
Yeah.
You could say, the Von Erich thing, they got pushed because they were the father owns the place. Nah, these guys got over on their own merits, and some of them didn't. That's what made it realistic. Not all these Harts were major stars. They were there.
Yeah.
Some had short runs.
Yeah.
Some of them decided to do something else in the organization. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't a super, we're going to push all my kids. Imagine trotting his 8 kids into the ring at the same time and have them do 8-man tags or something silly like that. I respect Stu Hart for that and whoever was doing the booking at that point, because they did not tilt the favor toward the Hart people. They just didn't.
No, they didn't. And it stood out. I think, right, wasn't it Wayne who became a referee, right? I think it was Wayne who was a referee, or Smith. It was one of the two. I think it was Wayne. Smith did a lot of background stuff. And Bruce, again, he was a tag guy. Keith was a mid-level guy, wasn't a big main event guy, but he won some tag titles with Bret. Keith was mainly a mid-heavyweight, a tag guy. Bret was more your main event. No, it did not tilt. I think that's the difference where I think, the difference with the Von Erichs was you had David, Kevin, and Kerry, who were all very good on their own level, got over on their own, even though, Dad pushed them. The Von Erichs were gods in Texas in the early 80s. But then you had Mike, who really wasn't, and there was the pressure to replace David, and, then you had fake Von Erichs. You didn't have fake Harts coming in. There's some of that, where the pressure to be a Von Erich, I think, was greater than the pressure to be a Hart in Calgary. But I think that worked for them, the Harts. They had so much other talent around there that it just worked for them. And they were not always the focal point of everything. And they had talent in that territory where the Von Erichs really were the focal point of world-class wrestling. And without them, there's no real, world-class wrestling.
But I always respected all those guys, because it's like, it must have been hard. It was great that they had a place to have wrestling in their blood and learn how to do it. But, the expectations for the son of a wrestler are always way high. Yeah. That's why it felt good for guys like Jake Roberts, because nobody knew who his dad was. And, guys who entered with different names because they didn't have to live up to the hype of having a famous dad. Randy Orton, I think enough time elapsed between him and his dad where he didn't have to do I got to build myself up to his credibility type of thing. He just was his own man and got over on his own merits. But others, how many son wrestlers? Greg Gagne, poor guy.
Yeah.
But, to give Vern credit, never made him world champ. Never even came close.
No, because he wasn't that type of wrestler, but he was a hell of a tag team wrestler.
Yeah. Stampede, I think the heyday was probably 67 through around the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
Almost into 1988 or so. That's when they kind of threw in the towel when WWE was expanding, and they said, I can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
But it all boils down to Stu Hart.
Yeah.
Known in his wrestling days, scientific but tough as leather. And obviously it was a reputation that stuck because he was known to punish or stretch his students in the dungeon in his home in Calgary.
Yes.
I don't think any of those stories about him were exaggerated.
No, there is a cassette tape that I think Bret Hart, I want to say this might have been during that Wrestling with Shadows documentary. And it is a cassette tape, which makes it even scarier sounding, of Stu stretching a guy, and he's smacking him while he's stretching him, and you hear Stu going, have some discipline. The last person in the world that I want to be in a sugar hold, um,
Yeah.
applied by is Stu Hart.
How about any of them? The kids obviously know how to shoot too.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that's nice about being a sort of business insider, like I was with the PWI days and talking to people like Apter, Bill Apter and stuff like that, is there were times that people would say, "You see him over there? Him?" There was always a locker room enforcer. There was always a eye in the sky.
Yeah.
And if somebody got a little big for the britches or weren't really following the plans,
Yep.
they'd put him in there with somebody who would kind of teach him in about 10 minutes what he really should be doing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that happened in many territories. I think it's a famous story out of Mid-South that Bob Sweetan wasn't the world's most likable human. He ran afoul of one Dan Hodge, who is not a man that I would have want to have ran afoul of. And Danny Hodge stretched him in the ring one night. And Danny Hodge had those hands, you crush an apple, with one hand. And Danny stretched him, but then Danny did business and put Bob over and laid down, took the pin. But Bob Sweetan did not mess with Danny Hodge anymore after that.
We just did a rating of top 50 wrestlers from the 1960s. I don't know if you heard that show, but I had Danny Hodge up there really high. Danny Hodge, I think it was an era where he was a light heavyweight champion, but it meant something.
It did.
And even an era where your amateur credentials meant even more, if you can imagine that.
Yeah.
Now you have fine amateur wrestlers coming into the business. I mean, look at Chad Gable.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody even refers to that stuff with him. They just know he's a really good wrestler. But in the day, they would use it to hype your baby faces.
Oh, yeah.
This was an NCAA champion, whatever you want to call it. Briscoe, yeah, sure. So it just shows you the way things have changed.
Absolutely.
Now you stick a syringe through somebody's cheek. That's really good.
Awful.
I know. Well, let's not get off on that because I'll tell you what, I'm Mr. Facebook when it comes. I'm always reposting stuff that people use as sizzle reels that make me sick. So, and I'm not sick because it's violent. Sick because they shouldn't be doing it.
No, agreed. But something that we should discuss, I would be remiss if I did not mention this wrestler. One of my all-time favorites, Archie Goldie, the Stomper.
You know something? I have a line here called the Stars of Classic Stampede. Let me just read this list. Let's get back to the Mongolian Stomper. Abby was in there a lot. Yep. Mongolian Stomper. Ben Basarab. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Ben Basarab. Yep.
The Butcher and the Mad Dog, the Fashan brothers.
Yes.
Adrian Street, Don Morocco, Edouard Carpentier.
Yes.
Killer Kowalski, Stan Stasiak, Angela Mosca, Dory Funk Jr., Waldo Von Erich, who I look back on and think he was way, way, way underrated.
Agreed.
He could be a lead heel the minute he walks into a company. He was really that good.
Agreed.
But yeah, let's talk about Mongolian Stomper because you know what? Most fearsome looking, fantastic bodied heel of all time.
Agreed. When he had the shaved head and he was always oiled up, when he had that pose, that menacing pose he would do, I think you know what I'm talking about, where he'd stretch out, I don't know, with the deltoids or whatever it is, but man, just a scary looking dude, Archie Goldie. And he was rough and tough. Man, did I love watching him. And there's a promo he does in Calgary where he is telling Bret Hart that he's gonna put a hurting on him. And he doesn't care that it's Stu Hart's boy. And he actually, too, had a little bit of a babyface run. They did a angle where they had his son, and it was his kayfabe son, it wasn't his real son, Jeff Goldie, come in. And Jeff Goldie ended up becoming Tommy Lane of the Rock and Roll RPMs. But they did that for a while. I forget who he was feuding with at that time. But poor Jeff Goldie came in and got a stomping, and Archie Goldie, dad, came in and put a stop to that because that's what the Stomper does. And Archie Goldie, to me, criminally underrated, not talked about enough, but he was a rival. I mean, he was a top star in Stampede for years upon years.
You just came up with a show concept for me. Top 15 intimidating looking wrestlers. I would put Johnny Valentine number 1.
Oh, yeah.
And Mongolian Stomper number 2. My number 3,
It's going to sound funny. Dick Beyer with a mask on.
I will take that. Dick
I
Beyer
thought
was
that was a
absolutely
scary
intimidating.
heckin' face when it was the 60s and 70s reading my wrestling magazines, and there's the Destroyer. I'm like, oh, he just looked like he looked demented.
He did. That nose.
Yeah, there's something about it, and he wasn't that bad of a looking guy with his mask off.
No, he wasn't.
But when he
Dick
put
Beyer.
that thing on, woof, it was just the way the eye holes and mouth hole were assembled. He looked like an escaped convict from an asylum or something. He looked nuts.
Nobody else ever wore a mask that style, really. You know, he looked completely different as Dr. X, which was the point. But yeah, you know, I will go with that. Yeah, Dick Beyer did very much look very menacing. Looked like a horror movie villain.
That's a show. We're going to do the 10 or 15 or maybe 25 most intimidating just looking wrestlers of all time. Johnny Valentine looked like everything was real.
Oh.
He just steps through the ropes and you hear him talk. He wasn't faking.
No.
There's no way you would think he was faking.
No.
I love that. I just, that's skill, that's craft, it's everything you want.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he wasn't always a heel. He was a babyface too, but
Was.
depending on where he was, but just the realism of Johnny Valentine, you can't beat it with a stick.
No. Without a doubt. And again, another career that came to an end way too early. You know, but Johnny Valentine was tough as nails, grittier than gritty. It's a great match on YouTube between him and Bull Curry from
In Texas, yeah.
and that's worth anybody's time who is a fan of Johnny Valentine. And again, I go back to the Scotty Richardson connection and Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. Boy, you know, was he a star there.
Now, overall impressions of Calgary Stampede, the TV show, pretty good show.
Yeah, agreed.
Photographed very well. Ed Whalen,
a ring-a-ding-dong dandy.
And I researched it just a tiny bit and found out that Sam Menaker used to do interviews on the show. And nobody did better interviews than Sam Menaker.
Love Sam.
That isn't right. You shouldn't do that. I love Menaker. And he'd Menaker would strap him on every so often. He's a former wrestler. And he looked completely out of shape and old with big Coke model glasses. And every so often he'd strap him on and go in the ring. I love that. I think that's just awesome.
He had a great
I have
voice.
yet to see it, but I read about it. He had a great voice. We'll return after these messages. You know, it's just the old school. Give me old school 10 times out of 10. The hulkier and more good guyish that the announcer is, the better I like him. Give me Jack Reynolds. Give me Sam Menaker. Give me those guys who were Jack Reynolds. Somebody be stomping. That's uncalled for. Did you see that text? That's uncalled for. The bell already read. You know what I'm saying? Just those guys. That's what wrestling doesn't have today. Let me be an old timer here. That's what wrestling doesn't have today. The announcers aren't offended by the rule breaking. It's considered part of what everybody does now. That'd be ganged up upon or hit with something. But back in the day, if you hit somebody with something that was laying around on the desk, they wanted you fined and suspended. We need that outrage back. It's realistic.
Agreed. And that's really what made the magic of wrestling. It's what made it work. It went against your moral compass that somebody did that. That's what made a bad guy and a good guy. Now there's bad guys and there's even worse guys. There are no more real true baby faces anymore. Good guys want to be really cool bad guys is basically what it comes down to. And that's what kind of started in the late 90s was, well, we have to be cool. And it wasn't about a bad guy selling anymore. It was about, well, the bad guy has to be cool. And that kind of muddied the waters there. And it grinds my gears when I hear people say, well, heels and baby faces are a lost concept. You know, it's an old school way of thinking. No, it's what makes wrestling work.
I agree, but today's wrestlers are all anti-heroes.
And that's it.
It's not a body slam to get you over. It's a insult before the match as your two guys argue in the ring. That's the psychology now.
Yeah.
That's how they're building WrestleMania with Reigns and Punk. Who can insult the other one worse? There's no action going on. It's just they're just talking to each other in the middle of the ring with nobody else there.
Yeah.
I can't say I caught into it, but that's today's wrestling. That's the way they do it.
But take a look how effective on the other side Randy Orton was destroying Cody Rhodes. That made you feel something.
There's some action there, yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're appalled that Randy Orton could go that far, you know, and hurt Cody like that. And I'm like, I'm sold. I wasn't sold on that match right away, but now I'm sold.
I have to give WWE credit for one thing. They use blood judiciously.
They
If you
do.
overdo blood, it loses its shock value.
Yes.
And they use it on a rare occasion when they need it on television, and it always works because it's not rammed down your throat 3 matches on a pay-per-view.
No. I mean, AEW, they bleed on television weekly.
Well, that's a polite greeting on AEW. You just walk in and slash somebody. It's that give the finger and the curse. And I don't know what to say. Kiddies out there, listen. At least we still have wrestling. There's wrestling left to enjoy out there.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I really enjoyed the tail end of Calgary Stampede Wrestling. I'll always call it Calgary Stampede because I think that's what we called it in the magazines. And no pretense, old school, wild brawls, great science. It looked great on TV. Whatever that arena they were using was just the right size. It wasn't big enough, it wasn't small. You remember that? It wasn't a huge arena.
Yeah.
And I don't ever remember it looking empty.
No, they were bought into it. It really looked good, and it worked for them. And it was an institution in Calgary, the Stampede Wrestling. And, Stampede, funny enough, you look back, they invented the ladder match. And much different than a ladder match that you see today that's all plunder and tables and objects. These guys didn't spend the whole match trying to climb ladder. They were beating the crap out of each other. The ladder, yes, became a weapon at times, but they were the first ones, hang a bag of money above the ring and have like a painter's ladder in there, and they did it the best. And so when Bret brings the ladder match to the WWF, that's where this starts. To me, the best ladder match that they've done was one of the first ones they did. It was on one of the Coliseum video releases, Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. And it's a simple match. It's not high spots. And there's not anything wrong with that. But there was psychology to it. It made sense, the use of the ladder. Now you see guys, right, they're going 1,000 miles a minute, and then they forget how to climb a ladder all of a sudden. It kills me every time.
You mentioned it. You mentioned the word psychology, and that is my jam. And I like the old school psychology the best. And it has nothing to do with good guy, bad guy. I just think the minute you say, it doesn't matter if this is realistic or not, that's when you're going to fail.
Yeah.
I don't care what they draw, because your crowd is going to be transient. The minute everybody thinks, oh, this is just a show we're looking at. Hey, look, Ice Capades.
Yeah.
Right? There's always another show. Wrestling was a singular animal using its traditional psychology. You couldn't find that feel anywhere else.
Yeah.
Again, they're printing money now. I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I'm never going to get my way. Nobody's going to go back to, ill-fitting tuxedo ring announcers and all that stuff. Things have changed. And even the ring announcers perform now. They just don't tell you who's in the ring.
Yeah.
Representing the Judgment Day. They're acting.
Yeah.
They're acting. It's like they're trying to get a role on an NBC sitcom or something. It's crazy. Well, I'm old. I saw the greats, though. I'm telling you right now. I saw Eddie Carpentier when he was 26. That's not exactly true, but it's not exactly a lie either. I did see I saw Carpentier a lot. Everywhere I went in my life. Special attraction, Edward Carpentier, Calgary. WWF, Edward Carpentier is here. I went up to Canada, near Canada. I went to college in Rochester. I'll be darned if Grand Prix, Edward Carpentier is here. I went, wow. So I thought he was the biggest thing since sliced bread, because every time he showed up in any organization, they made a really big deal about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And he could do it all.
And when I was researching the story about the 60s, he must have sold a lot of tickets because he was top 10 in virtually every federation he worked in. He worked in them all.
Oh, yeah. He was well-traveled. Again, just did things that nobody else did at that time. Did some really good acrobatics, but again, it was not wasted motion. Knew how to work a crowd, knew how to work a match, and did it very well for a very long time. I mean, he stayed in great shape. I mean, he wrestled into his 50s and did wonderful and was in great shape all the way through.
But here's the thing about Carpentier. He wasn't a small guy. He was built.
He was a pretty built
and
guy.
He was as sinewy and so supple as a light heavyweight.
Yeah.
And he had this odd, rugged, good-looking demeanor. Women loved him.
Oh, yeah.
Carpentier. He was, Edward, love those old candidate tapes, And, I love going back and talking about things like Stampede. My overall view of it, enjoyed it as much. I miss the days when I was at PWI and I got a stack of videotapes on a Monday morning and I had 12 different shows to watch.
Mm.
And I enjoyed every minute of those 12 shows.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way anymore. This is why I'm not a bitter old man. I miss that feeling of having to watch it and being totally entertained from tape 1 to tape 6 of the VHSs that are sitting on my desk.
Absolutely.
And I really felt it with the Pedicino block of 8 hours of wrestling.
So good.
The only thing I didn't watch, it was local shows that they had here that I've already seen.
Yeah.
And they had them like a week late there or something like that.
Yeah.
But to be able to see Calgary and Smoky Mountain and Continental and Georgia All-Star and all this other stuff that nobody else was seeing except for me because I was lucky enough to have access to those tapes. Invaluable in writing the magazines, invaluable in just having a good time.
Oh, yeah. That's why, and listen, I enjoy today's wrestling, but it's just not the same. And it's why I still go back to the videos and to the old territories, and I want to catch up. I want to see as much as I can and learn about history and see more and see guys that I've only read about this guy. I want to watch more and I want to learn more and I want to see it. I just love picking up the things that they did, why they did, and just seeing kind of the masterpiece being written there.
Excuse me, I'm romantic about the old days. I really am. I would give anything to go back to Albany, New York and sit in that armory because they still run wrestling there on occasion in that building. But I guarantee you it won't be the same. Like if you go to the ECW Arena, what was the ECW Arena now, which is called
2300
now. Thank you, in Philadelphia. It's nice now.
Yeah.
I liked it better when it wasn't that nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it had that grit to it. Yeah. That the smell of beer and anger.
Yeah.
And I liked it better then. I just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm going to go back to my childhood haunt where I bought tickets out of a cigar box. They handed it to me out of a cigar box and be disappointed when it's all digitized and you hold your phone up and I guarantee you the seats are nicer and everything is nicer in there now. And
so it's not
I would have preferred it with the old rickety wooden chairs and, the one light over the ring. It's not going to be that way anymore.
No.
If they have wrestling, it's going to be modernized.
No.
And it'll probably have better food too.
Yeah. I saw my first live wrestling matches at Holy Child Church Gymnasium in Staten Island. It was where the first 3-4 cards I ever went to were at that little church gym. I drive past that church sometimes when I'm in Staten Island. And I'm like, gosh, like there's that part of me that wants to go into the gym, but I'm like, I don't want it to look different. So I never go, and I want to remember it as it was. But yeah, you remember those memories and you remember what it was like in January 1991, Sting and Ric Flair at the old Meadowlands. I drive up past the Izod Center now. That's what it was called last time, but the old Brendan Byrne Arena.
You were at the 91?
I was there, yeah.
I was there too.
Oh, all right, Bob. Yeah.
Yes, it was me and one other guy interviewing Ric Flair after the thing was over. I have no idea who the other
people there. I think it was
were.
blizzard that night.
Ice storm.
Yep.
It wasn't really it was an ice storm, which is worse.
Yeah.
And after drove, and we came in out of Long Island, and I didn't regret it. But I was thrilled with that card.
That was a great card that night. Doom
better than the pay-per-view in St. Louis later on.
Yeah, Doom and against Anderson and Wyndham in a cage. That was great, Lawrence Taylor there that night. It was a fun card.
And it's always fun seeing you, my friend. And I think you should take a minute here to tell people about Wrestler Weekly, if you'd be so kind, what it is, how can they avail themselves of it, and have fun looking at what you have to offer.
Well, thank you very much. Wrestler Weekly, available on all your social media platforms, specifically Facebook, X, and Instagram. You could follow us there. We post about wrestling memorabilia. We post about classic wrestling. Share yours with us too. We'd love to hear from people who love to interact about their wrestling collections. We collect wrestling belts, magazines. The magazines are really our home run, and that's how we've come to some great relationships with Bill Apter and Bob and so many other wonderful people. And, we love chatting wrestling. We have the Family Bacon Wrestling book that was released a few years ago. And finally, we're in some of the final editing stages of the Belt versus Belt book coming out in hopefully before the end of this year. So Scotty's been working hard, and hopefully we'll be there. I know Bob, I believe you wrote did you write the foreword for the book for this one, Bob? Or
No, I wrote a synopsis.
a synopsis,
Or
that's right. Yep.
I'll call it a pull quote. They'll probably end up in the back of the book, and I'll be proud if that's the case.
Yep. And then I wrote a small piece of an intro to this as well. So I'm very proud to be a part of that as well. But that's how you can find us, Wrestler Weekly.
Yeah, it's just great. It is, and the price is right, and it's nothing but fun. Nothing but fun, and no pretense to it. Check out this belt. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Enjoy what you got when you got it while you're here. I don't know what to say other than, everybody, if you love AEW, which I don't like that much, good for you.
Yeah.
At least you got wrestling in your life, and the old sport is bigger than it's ever been. I think it's bigger than it's ever been right now, or at least last year. I think they reached a real peak in terms of popularity and dollars earned. It's unbelievable at this point, isn't it?
And you want wrestling to thrive, right? I think the biggest thing is you want to see people be safe out there. You want to see people not doing things that aren't wrestling. And I think that's the big thing. But you enjoy the wrestling that you enjoy. That's the cool thing about it, is you get to enjoy what you want. And if you do that and it works for you, don't worry about what anybody else is doing. You do what works for you.
You know what? Probably why I still watch. I say this all the time. Women's division in WWE is awesome.
Oh, it's great.
And the reason it's better than the men is they're not as corny.
No.
I don't like you. I don't like you either. Bang. Great.
Yeah,
that's
right.
perfect.
There's a match.
What more do you need? You don't have to go through, 6 weeks of yelling at each other in the ring to get a
match
feud going. Just get in there.
Yeah.
So no, I think the women's division is just one of the best things I've ever seen in all these years. I did a show with Puccio. He said, "Who's your all-time favorite female wrestler?" I went, "Bang, Rhea Ripley." Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every other name on my list of stuff was old. I picked her as my favorite female wrestler because I've never seen anything like her.
Yeah. She's a star.
Totally original, big woman, all the talent in the world, can tie you up like a pretzel or slam you around, can fly over the ropes. What more could you ask for? And charisma at the years. It's amazing.
And she's one, and I think we've gotten to a point now where you take a look and you wouldn't just say, because back in the day, I think you would. The women's style was so different. It was so hair pulling and catty, right? Where now
they were all wildcats.
Yeah. Now they
look
wrestle.
at those wildcats go. Right?
Where before you had to go overseas to see women's wrestling, where you had a few American like Medusa who could really wrestle. Now you take a look and you go, well, she's not just a good women's wrestler. She's a good professional wrestler. When you don't qualify it with, oh, she's a good women's talent. She's a good wrestler. And there's so many of them that are, and it's incredible to watch. But I agree with you 1,000% on Rhea Ripley.
Yeah. And there's some new faces there. They're stellar. They really are. A couple of the old timers I've had on the show don't agree with me on this at all. I just think it adds such lilt, and the fact that they're equal to the men, it gives the shows a better flow in that regard. Isn't that the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed.
And anyway, Mike, it's good to see you, my friend. I hope everything is continuing to go well. You look good. I know you're a busy boy these days, all kinds of responsibilities, but you know what? You are to be admired. You've done some really good things in the past couple of years, and I'm proud of you, man. You're really coming into your own lately.
Oh, thanks, Bob. I appreciate that. And again, same to you. You look great. I'm always happy to see you, and always glad when we can do a show together. It's truly one of my favorite things to do. Is to get to check in with you and to do these, and hopefully all the fans enjoy it.
We'll find something with some hair on it to talk about. We'll get another concept from back in the day to debate, as it were. Actually, we never debate on this show. We just kind of look back with, like I said, fondness and gratitude at the stuff we really enjoyed when we were younger.
Yeah.
That's basically it. It must work because we're still here. I don't know how to put this. Somebody sent me some statistics and they blew me away. I'll just put it that way about how well this show is doing.
That's so great.
And here's how you know you got a successful podcast. When people are trying to get you to invest in them as like marketers and stuff. Here's my response to that. Get out of here. Wrestling is singular. Yeah. I could promote this thing in various amounts of like advertising ways. My audience is in a big box.
Yeah.
and I'm not going to grow it past the size of that box. I'm just not. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know, all of us doing the nostalgia thing. You're only going to have a certain strata of wrestling fans that even want to listen to it, and they'll love it. But the other strata wants to listen about what's going on now, and I understand that. It's perfect. That's the way it should be.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
a lot of great podcasts about current wrestling. You can't beat it. I just like being part of the niche. I've already exceeded my own expectations, and I hope to continue doing this until it gets unseemly or I get too old or, hey, you know what we're going to talk about? Here's what we're going to talk about. Puccio, what are we talking about? If I get to that point, I'm not doing it anymore. But as long as I still have my chops.
Exactly.
You gotta have your chops. Or a steak. Steak's good too.
Steak is great. You start doing, shows on. Remember when they used to tape the turnbuckles?
That's right. You ever see the ring in Memphis? It was all duct tape.
Yeah.
Like it'd be red duct tape and blue duct tape. They just threw it on there and it just kept working. There's not a word of that's a lie, folks. That was really true.
Not at all.
And there'd always be a hanging piece of duct tape. Did you notice that on the Memphis ring?
And that ring,
but that gave it character.
It did.
I got into the ring. I'm proud to say I stood in that ring when I visited Memphis that one week, and I stood in that ring.
That's awesome.
Where so many people have bounced on, and I was like, the only thing that gave me a feeling like that was realizing on an IWCCW show that I was standing in the same spot that Vince McMahon used to stand to interview Tony Atlas.
That's cool.
The same spot in front of a ring. And I went, oh my gosh, this is the place, isn't it?
That's cool.
And I talked to Brian Webster about it, who was the host. He says, yes, I got that feeling every time I walked into that place.
Oh, that's so cool.
So, I've had my upbeat things,
Yeah.
Yet I remain poor and unknown. How does this work? Anyway, it's Mike Leotis. Good to see you, my friend.
Same to you, Bob.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. All right, everybody, there's another one in the books. We want to thank our good pal, Mike Leotis, for stopping by once again, one of our regular guests on the show. Guy knows everything about everything. Terrific guys, him and Scotty Richardson of Wrestler Weekly. Check it out online, everywhere. You will not regret it. Great belts, great wrestling magazine covers, just great. There's a couple of real lifetime wrestling fans, I'll tell you. And check out Scotty Richardson's books, too. He's got one coming out later this year, fingers crossed. And Family Bacon Wrestling is a terrific book. It's a kind of a memoir. I own it. I'm proud to have it. And I have a T-shirt. I got a T-shirt from them, from Pro Wrestling Tees. That's how much I enjoy the book. And the company of both Scotty Richardson and Mike Leotis. So look for them mainly on Facebook. If you really want to grab a copy of the book, I know it's at Amazon. So check it out. It's well worth your time. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. For a nominal fee, you can join the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, perpetuate the goings-on of this and the Outdated Entertainment Hour podcasts. So if you're interested in that, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where every single one of our old episodes is up, FOC, free of charge. Listening from number 1 all the way to, oh gosh, we run a $150, $160 at this point. I'm not even sure of how many episodes we do. I don't care about that stuff until I hit a round number. I don't really look at it all that much. So I other podcasters, this is episode 674, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a traditional podcast thing to do. I was told by a podcast pro, though, don't do it. Doesn't mean anything. So I don't do it.
Hey, the ones that are out there big timing, I take their advice all the time. Trust me on that. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith, Singing with BB King on the lead page. You can also find me at every single other social media, X and Threads, and Blue Sky, and everything. I can't think of anything I'm not part of. So I'm there, either Bob Smith or outdated_Bob. Underscore is a thing, not a word. I should change it to a word. But in any event, yeah, we'll let you go. It's been a good show. Love Canada. Love talking about it. Love professional wrestling, especially the old stuff. Thank you, Joe Puccio. Thank you, Mike Leotis. Thank all of you for listening once again. It's truly appreciated. We will keep you apprised of possible schedule changes, although I'm hoping there won't be any. I gotta let the cat out of the bag a little bit. Like I said, I'm going to have a medical procedure done. Might knock me on my butt for a while. I don't know yet. I just don't know. But in the meantime, I am feverishly putting together shows. Don't want to miss a Friday. It's a big deal to me. Really love doing the podcast, and I want to just keep it going, even if I'm laid up for a while. So in any event, look for us every Friday. We'll be here for you. My name is Bob Smith, formerly with PWI and WCW and WOW and Wrestling's Main Event, and just keep going down the list. You've seen my name for years, and I appreciate your support and loyalty all these decades. So until next time, in the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.